My mother called CPS on my wife and tried to have her arrested for child abuse after she moved in with us. However, I discovered her secret recordings and realized she was trying to destroy our marriage. Everything began so innocently, or at least that's how I tried to convince myself. Life was, for the most part, uncomplicated. Brittany, my wife, and I had 2 kids and a decent routine that we followed without too many interruptions. My mother, who was living on her own, had started facing some personal issues, health problems to be specific, and as a family, we decided it would make sense to invite her to move in with us. It wasn't going to be forever, just a temporary arrangement. She'd be close by if we needed her and we could help her with whatever she needed. Simple, right? But from the moment she arrived, things began to shift in subtle ways that I ignored at first. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was an undercurrent of tension that I didn't quite understand. My mother always had a way of making herself the center of attention, always had something to say about how things were done in my house, and after a few weeks, I noticed that she was offering more and more unsolicited advice about how Brittany and I were raising our kids. Little comments here and there about how things used to be different when she was raising me, more strict, more disciplined. I tried to brush it off. Everyone knows how mothers can be, right? But over time, the comments became less like advice and more like pointed criticisms. It was as though she was waiting for something to go wrong, or perhaps trying to make something out of nothing. One day, after a particularly frustrating morning, I came home to find my mother in the kitchen, fuming. She had just witnessed a small disagreement between Brittany and the kids about their bedtime routine. To me, it seemed entirely normal, a little chaotic maybe, but nothing out of the ordinary. My mother, however, didn't see it that way. "She's too hard on them," my mother muttered, her voice sharp. "They're just children. You need to step in and stop her from being so cold." I brushed it off at the time, telling myself she was just being overprotective. But things only escalated from there. I couldn't pinpoint exactly when things took a darker turn, but one evening a series of messages from my cousin Mark brought it all to light. The messages were screenshots from a family WhatsApp group I hadn't checked in years. I had left it long ago because it was just too much noise, people arguing about politics or gossiping about the most trivial things. But these messages were different. They made my stomach drop. My mother had been spreading horrible lies about Brittany. She had claimed that Brittany was an alcoholic, that she came home drunk and locked the kids in their rooms as punishment. She said I was too scared of Brittany to do anything about it. I couldn't believe what I was reading. I felt like the floor had been ripped out from beneath me. These were not just the ramblings of an upset mother, they were calculated, deliberate attacks. As the days went on, the lies only multiplied. I received calls from family members who were beginning to buy into my mother's narrative. My Aunt Patricia, sounding distraught, told me she was heartbroken that she hadn't seen the signs of abuse during her last visit. My Uncle Robert, who had always been the most rational person in the family, sent me an email accusing me of being complicit by not noticing what my mother claimed was abuse happening right under my nose. The worst part was, some of them actually believed her. The whole thing felt like a bad dream. I started thinking maybe I was missing something, that I was being naive. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, something far beyond just an angry mother. And then the truth started to surface, bit by bit, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place in a way I couldn't ignore. The breaking point came when my sister, Amy, came over one evening looking pale and shaken. She had been going through some of my mother's things while helping her move out, and what she found made my blood run cold. In the back of a drawer, buried under a pile of old papers, was a notebook. The pages were filled with detailed notes, dates, times, descriptions of suspicious behavior. I couldn't fathom what I was reading as Amy explained it to me. My mother had been secretly documenting every small injury the kids had sustained. Emma getting a scrape at the playground, Lucas bumping his head on the coffee table. Each was meticulously logged with a sinister interpretation of how it happened. But it didn't stop there. My mother had taken things to an entirely new level. She had been recording us. A small device, disguised as a pen, was worn around the house to capture moments she could twist into something darker. I was appalled. Amy had listened to some of the recordings. They were nothing more than mundane snippets of our daily life. Brittany singing to the kids, a simple warning as Lucas reached for something hot, the typical sounds of family life. But in my mother's eyes, these ordinary moments were evidence of abuse. I could feel the anger building inside me, but also a deep sense of betrayal. It was one thing for my mother to be upset or critical, but this was something else entirely. She wasn't just making false accusations, she was actively trying to destroy our family. Then I learned what she had done with Emma's bike accident. Emma had fallen and scraped her knee while learning to ride, and my mother had been there to take close-up pictures of the bruises, all while pretending to help Emma. She even tried to corner Emma and ask her how she had really gotten hurt, hoping the child would tell a different story. But Emma, bless her heart, was too innocent to fall into the trap. She happily recounted her bike accident, and my mother's plan fell apart. That was the moment I knew I had to act. I couldn't just sit back and let her destroy our family. Brittany was in pieces when I told her about the recordings. She couldn't believe it. She kept asking what else my mother had documented, how much more she had twisted. We had no choice but to take steps to protect our children. I called the school and daycare, informing them that my mother was no longer allowed any contact with the kids. Then I hired a lawyer. The lawyer confirmed what I feared. This wasn't just family drama. This was harassment, defamation, and an attempt to manipulate reality. We gathered every bit of evidence we could find: the notebook, the photos, the WhatsApp messages, the social media reports. I even sent proof of Brittany's work schedule to family members who were still questioning us. Some of them at least saw reason and apologized. Others chose to stick with my mother's narrative, and I blocked them without a second thought. We eventually got a restraining order, which was a relief in some ways. It stopped the direct harassment, but the emotional damage was already done. Brittany was devastated. She had always prided herself on being a good mother, and seeing her character attacked in such a vicious way shook her to her core. The kids sensed something was wrong, but we tried to protect them from the full extent of it. Emma, however, asked me one day if Grandma was mad at us because we were bad, and it broke my heart. But the more I looked at the wreckage left behind by my mother's actions, the more I realized there was no going back. The family I had known, the trust we had built, was shattered. Even as I began to gather the pieces of my own life, the fallout from my mother's twisted campaign would haunt us for a long time to come. There was no fixing what she had done. No apology would ever make it right. And now, I had to protect my family whatever it took.